I'm going to talk to you about a paradox, and specifically what I call the sleep paradox. How part of you needs to sleep to be healthy, and part of you is on high alert to stay healthy and safe. And that's the paradox. But before I do that, I want to ask you for something super important. If this content means something to you, if it's important, please follow us, subscribe, like, and comment. We love comments. We respond to them, good, bad, and different. Please like, follow, subscribe, and comment. So do you wake up feeling exhausted even after what you would consider a full night's sleep? What if I told you your past might be actively sabotaging your rest every single night? Today we're unpacking what I call the sleep paradox, the strange and deeply frustrating experience where the body is desperate for rest, yet the nervous system refuses to allow it. Now, this is not a motivation issue. I know you're motivated to sleep, and it's not a discipline issue. And it's definitely not just a, hey, go relax issue. It's a nervous system issue. And for years, sleep felt like a battle I was constantly losing. I could be physically exhausted, mentally drained, and yet the moment my head hit the pillow, my system would shift into alert mode. An hour and a half later or 45 minutes later, I'd have racing thoughts, shallow breathing, a body that felt like it was bracing for impact instead of preparing for rest and repair. If you've ever felt like your body wants to rest but your system won't let it, you're not broken and you're not alone. Here's the core truth that most people miss. Sleep is not something you do. Sleep is something your nervous system allows you to do. And trauma fundamentally disrupts that permission. Modern sleep science, including the work of Matthew Walker in his book, Why We Sleep, shows us that sleep is the brain's primary mechanism for emotional regulation, memory integration, immune system repair, and nervous system recalibration. During deep, non-REM sleep, the brain performs physical restoration. During REM sleep, it performs emotional processing, decoupling emotional charge from memory content. But here's the paradox. Trauma requires sleep to heal, yet trauma impairs the very neural conditions required for sleep. How does that happen? Because trauma is not stored as a story. It's stored as unfinished survival physiology. When the nervous system has learned through lived experience that it's not safe to fully power down, it remains sympathetically dominated, meaning negatively aroused. Heart rate stays slightly elevated, cortisol rhythms flatten, amygdala remains hypersensitive, hypervigilant, and the brainstem continues scanning for a real threat. Even in the dark, even in silence, and even in bed. So when the night comes, the exact moment the nervous system is supposed to shift out of sympathetic vigilance and into parasympathetic rest and repair, the system does the opposite. It interprets the stillness and the darkness as potential danger. And that's why people with unresolved trauma don't just struggle to fall asleep, they struggle to stay asleep. They wake from vivid, troubling dreams. They experience early morning cortisol spikes before the normal natural cortisol spike. They wake feeling unrested, foggy, and emotionally raw, not because they slept wrong, but because their nervous system never made the parasympathetic transition. And this is where mainstream sleep advice completely misses the mark. You cannot cognitively convince a sympathetically dominated nervous system to rest, to shut down. You can't positive think your way into parasympathetic tone. You cannot discipline a survival response into submission. Sleep disruption after trauma is not a psychological weakness. It's a biological vigilance. So how do we reclaim our sleep? And how do we do it without reliving the past? The answer is state regulation before sleep, not memory excavation during sleep. The goal is not to analyze trauma at night. The goal is to shift the nervous system out of sympathetic dominance and into parasympathetic safety long enough for the sleep architecture to reemerge and re-engage. And that begins with one critical understanding. Your nervous system responds far more to sensory input and spatial orientation than to insight. That is why visual spatial tasking and rhythmic breathing work so well. They bypass the narrative brain and communicate directly with the midbrain and the brainstem, the regions that decide whether parasympathetic activation is allowed and appropriate. So here are 3 principles that might help you sleep more than anything else. Call it a sleep hack. First, downshift before bed becomes the battlefield. If the first time your nervous system is asked to slow down is when the lights go off, you're already too late. Regulation must begin earlier through dimmer light, slower movement, reduced stimulation. Yes, I'm talking about your phone. And lower cognitive load. Quit thinking. Think about happy thoughts. This isn't lifestyle advice. This is autonomic sequencing. You're teaching the system that nightfall does not equal threat. It equals rest and reset. Second, replace rumination with orientation. A sympathetically dominant nervous system collapses inwards. It loops thought. It continuously scans. It replays. And that scanning is internal and external. Orientation does the opposite. Soft peripheral vision, seeing everything on either side, up and down, widening your visual field versus staring, signals safety to the brainstem. Slow spatial awareness tells the nervous system there is no immediate threat to track. Safety is not a thought. It is a felt spatial condition. The third part of this hack is use breath to actively stimulate your parasympathetic tone. One of the simplest and most effective tools here is cyclic sighing. What is that? It's a double inhale through the nose followed by a slow, long exhale through the mouth. This pattern of breathing directly stimulates the vagal pathways associated with parasympathetic activation. It tells the body the threat response can dial down. Stillness becomes tolerable when it's paired with regulation. Over time, the nervous system relearns something critical. Rest does not equal risk. Now, this is the realm of neuroscience I've talked about many, many times, called Hebb's Law. So when you start working with Hebb's Law and you can move into parasympathetic, this is how sleep can return. Not through Herculean effort, but through permission, giving your system the permission to sleep. Now, one important piece most people never get taught. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you're almost always waking from REM sleep. That doesn't mean something's wrong. It means your brain was doing some very, very important emotional processing. What matters is what you do next. Now, most of us, when we get woken up in the middle of the night, we get angry. Angry is part of the sympathetic nervous system. So I'm going to suggest to you, when you get woken up in the middle of the night, do your best to stay in parasympathetic. And if you wake up during REM, here's how you can do that. Stay laying down. Movement increases body temperature. Movement increases heart rate. To be asleep, our heart rate is lower than our resting heart rate, and our body temperature is about 1 degree Celsius cooler. So stay lying down. Stay in the dark. Turning on lights stimulates parts of your brain that will keep you awake. Leave your phone on the nightstand. Leave it alone. And leave the lights off. Instead, what you want to do is gently shift into peripheral vision. So just stay laying down, look up, pick a spot, stare at it. You can even do this with your eyes closed and imagine focusing on a spot and seeing everything to the left and right, up and down. Then start to do cyclic sighing to stimulate parasympathetic tone. You are not trying to fall asleep harder here. You are allowing the system to re-enter parasympathetic dominance. Now, most people accidentally re-trigger the sympathetic activation by sitting up, checking the time, or engaging in thought and turning on lights. Darkness, stillness, peripheral awareness, and breath keep the system oriented towards safety and parasympathetic, which again is rest and reset. And when sleep begins to stabilize, something remarkable happens. Emotional reactivity decreases. Cognitive clarity improves. Pain perception shifts. Memory integration resumes. Sleep is not just recovery. Sleep is neurobiological reconciliation. The tragedy is that so many people believe their broken sleep is the problem, when in reality it's not. The problem is the signal and to which part of their nervous system. A message from the nervous system that adapted brilliantly once, right after a traumatic event, and now needs help shutting off. If trauma has disrupted your sleep, the path forward is not harder nights or deeper analysis or medication. It's smarter regulation. Rest is not a luxury. Sleep wants to keep you healthy. The part of you that's scanning for threats wants to keep you safe and healthy. They both have the highest purpose. So rest is not a luxury, it's a biological requirement. And it's absolutely reclaimable. When the nervous system feels safe enough, sleep will do what it has always known how to do: repair, integrate, restore. That's the paradox.